Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook. I'm here to talk to you about the latest episode of Discovery Season 4, which was, of course, the Season 4 season finale called Coming Home. And as it begins, we see Tilly at Starfleet headquarters, which, by the way, can travel at warp. And she's working with her cadets, which I guess I didn't really pay attention. I guess were the same cadets that she had on that one meeting, on that one mission. But my understanding was she was going to teach a class, so I would have thought there would have been more cadets in her group. But anyway, she's got these cadets with her, and she's running around the station with them, ordering them to do this and that as everybody is trying to facilitate the evacuation of Earth and Titan so that as many people as possible can escape dying in the debris storm from the DMA. Meanwhile, over in the other galaxy, 10C, the species 10C, is trying to capture Book's ship in an orb, which is kind of weird, after it had already captured Discovery in an orb. And Michael has figured out that it was one of the diplomats who vented the plasma and started the shitstorm that occurred in the last episode as they were trying to make first contact. And the Earth Lady General person confesses to it having been her, just as Michael says she's about to lock all the delegates down until she figures out who did it, which, you know, at that point, she just locks down the Earth General Lady person. The Navarre president, whose name I guess is Tarina, I forgot, initiates a telepathic link with 10C when everyone is still trying to communicate with them. And she thinks this might be a good way to do it. So she touches the glass, I guess, which isn't a glass, it's a force field. I don't know. It's between them and species 10C in the cargo bay. I don't know. And anyway, she affects this telepathic communication. Anyway, she affects this telepathic communication, and it kind of throws her for a loop. But she comes away with it realizing that they don't trust Discovery or Book's ship. She says they don't understand individuality because they're a collective. As she's convalescing, Saru talks to her about how he's avoided closeness and how it's not a good thing to avoid closeness. Yada, yada, blah, blah, hallmark moment, blah. Over on Book's ship, Tarka is flying solo because he's got Book and Tig in the brig. Anyway, he's flying solo, and he tries to tempt Book into agreeing to help him with his plan by saying that if they're able to do this and he's able to activate the transporter and get to the other universe, Book will get his family back, his planet back, and everything. But Reno recognizes that that's not really true because it would just be different versions of them. And he agrees with her, saying, no, it won't really be them. It won't be the same. Screw you. Back in the Discovery, they come up with a plan to use the spore drive from within the orb in order to try to break out of it. But it would fry the drive, which they could then only fix back at space dock, meaning they'd have to use warp to get home, which would mean they'd have a decades-long trek ahead of them, a la Voyager. Anyway, it works. They get out of the orb. They then go after Tarka. Book gives Jet Reno his comm badge, and she's able to use it to beam right to the bridge of Discovery, which again happens right through the shields, right? Unless they're flying around this basically now enemy territory with their shields down, which of course they're not. And she gives them the lowdown on what's going on over on Book's ship. Back at Starfleet headquarters, the Admiral orders Earth to raise its shields to protect itself from debris coming at it from the DMA. And a shuttle almost gets destroyed, but is saved by the USS Mitchell, which I'm guessing is named after the character Gary Mitchell from Where No Man Has Gone Before. Discovery determines that they need to do a kamikaze run against Book's ship. And surprisingly, Michael does not volunteer to do it. She asks Detmer to do it because she's a great pilot. Detmer steps up to the plate, agrees she's going to do it, but then the Earth General Lady, who's apparently also a great pilot, volunteers instead, and they send her, thinking it's a suicide mission. Back over at Starfleet headquarters, Tilly decides to stay behind when everyone evacuates in order to help the Admiral provide cover fire for the people who are trying to escape on the ships, including her cadets, despite the fact that she probably won't be able to escape, nor will the Admiral. Back over on Book's ship, Book finds a way out of the cell that he's in by using his cat door. I didn't really understand it, but he gets out and he punches Tarka out, or down anyway, and he gives them like a talk, and he says, we've got to stop this. This isn't right. I'm in pain too, but we can't do this. We've got to back off. They're probably gonna succeed at the peace talks. It'll be okay. We got to stop. And Tarka's like, no, I have to get back to my friend. And Book's like, he's gone. You're not gonna find him. And he's like, you don't know that. But then he's like, yeah, I kind of do. And Tarka's like, okay, you're right, but I can't stop it because it's encrypted and blah blah blah. He basically, though, has a complete change of heart all of a sudden. Like, how many times have people told him, you can't do this, this is wrong, you shouldn't be doing this? And he's like, no, 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 no. And then all of a sudden, yeah, I guess you're right. What? There's enough power apparently to beam Book back over to Discovery, so he does that, but he stays behind, Tarka does, because there was only the power for one, and he also thinks he's going to be able to use his special transporter to still get to this other universe, but it seems like Book doesn't make it. His transport beam is interrupted and he doesn't make it. And of course, Michael breaks down, but then collects herself. After all, she's the captain of this ship, and she has to lead, and she prepares Discovery to enter an orb to, at this point, continue talks, now that Book's ship was incapacitated. As Tilly and the Admiral see their end coming, Tilly talks about how she doesn't actually have very many regrets, that she's found a great family and a great career despite the misgivings of her family. And the Admiral's like, well, that's hard to argue with that. I just wish I had spent more time with my family. Anyway, the orb ends up taking a bunch of people from Discovery, the delegates, the crew members, and so forth, to like a floating landmass, and opens up an oxygen-nitrogen environment, or a nitrogen-oxygen environment, for them to be able to breathe. And they finally like show up in the flesh, where they're not behind like a fog anymore, and they appear to be like giant space dragons or something. It was really bizarre, but there they were. And there's a lot of talking that goes on at this point. Saru is basically using a device to translate what the 10C are saying, and then to translate back to them what's being said by Michael and the delegates. And for a change, someone other than Michael makes the big speech that's made in this scene. It was the president, or the not president at this point. And that was a good thing, because usually it's Michael does all this stuff. It's always Michael. But they let somebody else do it again in this episode, second time. But then Michael does have to explain about Book and Tarka, because they ask, what was all that? And she explains, that they lost people and they were motivated by pain, and that's why they were acting the way they did. And when she goes on to explain what will happen to Earth and Navarre if they don't stop the DMA, 10C shuts it off immediately, and all of the debris flies away from Earth and Titan, and presumably Navarre, and the danger is over. So that was cool. And I actually thought that this was a really, really great scene, which was very, very worthy of Star Trek. And the scene actually moved me, because it was reminiscent to me of other Star Trek and other sci-fi, and in that way it's derivative as well. But you've got these two species that are vastly, vastly, vastly different from each other, and they're trying to bridge the gap and trying to communicate. And one of them is so advanced that they don't understand certain concepts that, humanoids understand, or Alpha Quadrant beings from the Milky Way galaxy understand. And just that whole thing of the crew and the ambassadors trying to convey general conditions of life among, humankind, humanoid kind, to another entity that has no concept of certain things like individuality and all of that, was very cool. It stokes the imagination. It stokes a sense of, it gives you a sense of awe, that this is a life we live every day, and it makes sense to us and we understand it, but another race might not. It was kind of like, the gods of the wormhole, the gods of the temple, as it were, in the wormhole in Deep Space Nine, that, didn't function, for example, in a linear way, and didn't really understand linear things, or why anyone would live in a linear way. They existed outside of that. So it was kind of a big scale thing that, isn't present in the differences between humans and Klingons, humans and Vulcans, humans and Ferengi humans, and Borg. They are all operating under the same sort of set of conditions. They're all operating within the same parameters, the same conditions of life in general. They just have differences culturally. This was beyond that. This was a difference of just planes of existence, basically. So that's always cool, I think, in sci-fi. So they did a good job with that. The 10C next asks why Michael is sad now that the DMA has stopped, and she explains about having lost Book very tearfully, at which point they bring Book back to her because apparently they intercepted his beam for some reason. Not Tig, not Jet, but they did intercept Book. Why? So that he could die and come back. It's kind of cheap. But at the same time, cool. I mean, we knew he wasn't dead. It was just a question of how they were going to bring him back. I thought that, Shaniqua Martin Green did a great job of expressing all the different crazy emotions that she had to go through in this episode, specifically in this moment, just as an actress. But I kind of thought it was out of place for a Starfleet officer. Still, Kirk gets choked up at Spock's funeral, but he chokes it back. When Spock dies, he basically just says, no. So it's always very reserved. He flips out a little bit when they kill David. He goes,
"Come on, bastard, you killed my son." Oh. Bring on, bastard, you've killed my son.
But then he takes a moment, he gathers himself, and he's back in command, back on mission. So Michael does the same thing. And I was fine with that. I just didn't think that, she would get so... She does the same thing at the moment that he dies. But what I didn't like was she got super teary explaining it to the 10C, and I understand it was still pretty much just as raw as it was the moment he died. It was only minutes later. But I felt like she should have held it together better, that a Starfleet officer should be capable of holding it better together than that. But that's just a side thing. I don't know. I could be wrong about that. 10C then says that they will only mine in uninhabited areas of space. And Book says, no, that's not good enough because it leaves behind toxic stuff that's still going to hurt people traveling through there or that might come to exist there or whatever. But they say they're afraid to stop using it because then they won't be able to power the field that keeps them protected from the rest of their galaxy. And Book says, you won't be able to perpetuate this forever, and the void will eventually come through. And, we all exist in this universe. We need to come together and not build walls. And at one point, it seems like he's also because he says these things out loud, but then it seems like he's also communicating with them telepathically with his ability. His forehead lights up and all that. And I thought this was pretty cool as well. And I say that because, first of all, he's right. And it was cool to sort of have that moment because I think it was the right thing to do. But secondly, because he's been through so much in this season, and for him to come out of it, because we thought he had at one point, was coping with it, but then it turns out he really wasn't. But now I think he's come out of it to the point where, okay, I'm sad, but I cannot let that sadness overtake me and change who I am and change my values and make me behave poorly. And he turns a corner, I think, at that point. And I think it happened in the previous episode. And for him to sort of say that to them, he's also saying it about himself, that he can't build walls, that you can't, feelings are going to come in and you can't. So I thought it was just really cool. And then they say, okay, we'll stop using it completely. And they even then open their wormhole that they usually would use to send the DMA through to send Discovery home. As everyone celebrates after this, Tilly and the crew of Discovery are reunited, and she hugs everybody, which wouldn't happen. Like, why do they have to do hugs? They don't do that. It's Starfleet, especially when you're the captain. It's so dumb. But anyway, Saru and Tarina have a moment. They end up holding hands. She says that he can call her by her first name. I still don't see that whole thing working, though, so I don't know why they went there. It's kind of bizarre, but anyway, there you go. Michael and the Federation president, who's now Federation president again, talk about what's going to happen to Book, and then he and Michael have a visit, and it turns out he's being sent by the Federation to help people who were displaced rather, by the DMA for an unknown period of time. He doesn't know how long he's going to be doing it. And after this conversation, during the conversation, they exchange I love yous, and he gets beamed away. Michael then records a log which talks about how 10C are in fact cleaning up their mess, and the crew seems to all be departing the ship for some shore leave to various places. We then see that Andoria is going to rejoin the Federation, and that Earth is going to rejoin the Federation as well. We find this out because Earth's president visits Starfleet headquarters to say so, and it turns out she was played by Stacey Abrams, which, in terms of acting, she did a competent job, actually. It was kind of, I wasn't expecting that. She didn't have that many lines, but she delivered them well. I don't really know why they went there. Like, I guess she's a huge Star Trek fan, but so am I. like I guess she's a politician, but a prominent politician, but what? Why does she get to be the Earth president? It was just a weird thing, and of course all the non-woke people are jumping all over it. I thought it was unnecessary myself. Anyway, it seems like the general person lady is not going to get punished for what she did. I don't know. They don't mention whether or not she's going to get any kind of punishment for what she did, and that's kind of weird because you would think she would. I don't know. But that's where the episode ends. Everything seems to be humming along. The Federation is firing on all thrusters now, as it were, and everything's in a good place. We know that's not going to last because at the beginning of season 5, they're going to have some other big catastrophe that Michael has to solve. So I don't know. It really would have been great if it ended there. It was a great series ending thing they did at the end, but they're not going to end it. We got at least 10 more episodes coming now next season. Overall, though, this actually was a really good episode. It very much felt like an epic Star Trek movie, which isn't to say that there weren't moments that were dumb. Like I mentioned the dumb moments, but I actually liked it a lot because of, like I said, Species 10C represents the writers thinking way outside the box. And that's just great. And it's a shame that they don't write as well as they wrote this episode and the last episode, where they were figuring out the whole speech thing and working through it. And it was just, like I said in my review, I thought that was very well done. It's a shame they don't write this well all of the time. And it's a shame that they're committed to this serialized format, because I think this whole 10C story on the whole would have been super strong if it were a 2-part episode. You know what I'm saying? A 2-part story that didn't have all the crazy, crazy, stupid stuff that made up the rest of the season. So, next season is going to be shorter, so hopefully we'll get less of that. Maybe they'll finally get it right in season 5. I don't know. That's my review of this episode. I'm scheduled, I should say, to do my first ever collaboration with another YouTuber. I did have one episode of this show where I reviewed episodes from The Mandalorian season 1 with my friend Tom, but he's not a YouTuber. I'm going to be doing my first collaboration, if everything goes as planned, with Matt from Geek What, which is a great YouTube channel. We're going to do a season review of Discovery season 4, and I'll have a lot to say about this season, kind of along the lines of what I've been saying, because they had some strong moments in other episodes of the season as well, but we'll get more into that in the collaboration. I mean, I already mentioned them in my individual reviews, but we're going to have a discuss. We're going to do a discuss, Matt and I, about this season, which we are both pretty much of the same mind on, in that it's really been bad overall. So that's it for now. I take my leave. And of course, as always, I say peace and long life.